car hits you that was speeding. He's an uninsured motorist. You're laid up for weeks. Your car's got a lot of damage that insurance doesn't cover. And your life has changed just like that. My point is this. I want us to get on top of our finances because that's one part of our life that we do have some control over, and that we can be less distracted when things that we don't have control over are going to come at you. And that's a sad fact of life, is that things will come at you. So what I want to talk about first is credit. What is the definition of credit? Now, when I ask this question in my classes, people give me lots and lots of answers, and I give them this little preface. There are many right answers to questions, but I want you to think about what is the single most important thing about credit. And in order to know that, you've got to know the definition. So this is on the website. It's the longest sentence I've ever written. I don't put in commas intentionally because I want you to play with this. I want you to think about it. I want you to read it carefully. Here's my definition of credit. Credit is when one person or an entity, could be like a bank or a credit card company, does something for another person or entity. So I'm going to repeat that. Credit is when one person or an entity does something for another person or entity with the reasonable expectation that the person that they did something for will do what they said in exchange for what was done for them. Okay, let me go through it again here. Basically, credit is when a person is willing to do something for somebody else because they trust that the person that they're going to do it for is going to fulfill their commitment. So I've entered the word trust. Credit is not just about money. That is part of it. Credit is more about character, honoring your good name, keeping your commitment, doing what you said you would do. Credit is when other people trust you and are willing to do something for you, to work with you, to give you an opportunity that you might have had a difficult time getting without somebody else's help. This kind of goes back to a basic theme that I have that, hey, we're all in the same boat. I said it's a biblical proportions. We're all in the same ark in this world. We need each other. If you ever go in and look at the Right Thinking Foundation logo, it says, in order to succeed, you got to be connected. You've got to be able to have a place to live, you got to have an income, and you got to be part of community. So we'll talk about that at great length in future weeks. In Greensville Correctional that day, we were talking about credit. And a guy in the back that had been incarcerated for about 8 years was going to be getting out in about a year. And he had written letters to the 3 credit bureaus to find out what was still sitting on his credit so he could clean up his credit. And he raised his hand, and he was really, really agitated. He said, it said that they would give you a free credit report if you request it. And he said, I got a credit report from one of the 3 agencies there, services, but I haven't gotten it from the other 2. And his point was, how can I make them give me my credit report? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. You got 1 report, right? He said, yeah. And I said, and your score was really, really low, right? He said, yeah. And I said, you don't really need to see the other 2 reports. You don't need to be angry at them for not giving it to you. Yeah, they should give it to you, but that's the way life is sometimes. People don't cooperate. I said, but the point here is this. you know your score is really, really low. You don't need any more confirmation to that. So let's just move forward with how do you rebuild your credit? And I told him, credit is a process. Credit is a process that if you don't use it properly, it becomes a trap. I've got a really close friend. His name's Richard Kay, and he's involved in high-level financial matters. He was the talk show host for a radio program on Gateway Bank on their mortgage program. And he's talked to me at length. We'll get him on the show soon. And he said the whole credit card is a game that is structured so that you will lose. That's a very, very difficult situation to hear. In the high school class, my students say, well, how do you get a credit card? And I said, all you got to do is open the mailbox. When you graduate high school or get into college, credit card companies will be putting credit in front of you. They'll just be giving it to you. Jeff told me when we were waiting to get on the air just now that he used to be a mediator, and he had a 22-year-old woman that had 32 credit cards. 32 credit cards, all with about a $5,000 limit, and she had to go to court, and they got rid of most of her balances. 6 months later, she was right back in the same place because after they cleared up all of her balances, they didn't take away her cards. What I'm trying to tell you is this. The credit card trap works like this. They give you credit, and you buy things that you can't afford, that you shouldn't be buying, and you think, well, I'm going to get paid next week, and I'll be able to pay this off because somebody told you that, hey, use a credit card. They don't charge you anything for the first 30 days that you from their statement, and you're using their money. It's free money. Well, it's not free money. It's only free money. That means no interest or no service charges if you use it properly. But most people, something comes up. Life gets in the way, and they end up having a problem with paying the bill properly. I have another close friend that's a high-powered lawyer, Chuck, and he used to be in the military, and he was in charge of a company of men, and he was in Germany. And one of his men, while he was in Germany, the man's wife ran up incredible credit card debts, and they ended up taking judgments on his paycheck. And Chuck told the guy, he said, hey, you got to get your wife to quit using your credit cards. Here's basically the credit card trap. If you use a credit card and it starts off at, say, 22% annual APR. Let's just round it up to 2% interest a month. You take the 22%, divide it by 12, that's your monthly interest. And you make a purchase. And your intention was to pay it off right away. But between the day you made a purchase that you didn't really have the cash that you shouldn't have bought, and the next month when you're going to pay it off, something breaks down, your refrigerator, your car, whatever. Something comes up that requires the use of your money that was unexpected. So instead of making the payment in full, you end up making a minimum payment. If you only make a 5% payment on a $100 purchase and they're charging you 2% interest a month, assuming you make your payments on time every month, it takes 15 years for the last penny of that purchase to be paid off. That's unbelievable. So if you go to my website, rightthink.org, and look at Right Thinking on Credit, you'll see that as an illustration. What happens is that people start using a credit card for things that they don't have the money for, and then something else comes up unexpected, and their funds are diverted. This ties back into having to be on a budget, know how to handle your money, know what you can and can't afford. And so, simple example, you get a $500 credit card. What that means is you have an available limit. They give you up to $500, and it's zero the day you get it. And all you have to do is to call up and activate the card, and it's yours to start using. And then you charge $100. Doesn't seem like much. You'll pay it back quick as you can. But then something happens, something unexpected. You don't pay off the 100, and then before you know it, you got to charge the other 400, run up the card to its maximum of $500 because you don't have enough money to pay all your other bills, and you're stuck having to live off of credit until you can get on your feet. I'm going to share a personal story with you right now. I will tell you that I am qualified to discuss this subject. I am qualified to discuss this subject as well as anybody that I know. If you've been listening to my show and the interview that I had with Jeff back in November, I've had 15 surgeries. I've carried 2 cancers. I've been in and out of severe debt. Some of it might have been my fault, but some of it could very easily be simply because I didn't have enough income because I was out of work, and I ended up having to rely on credit. Thankfully, I've always had very, very high credit. I've kept my credit high. One of my main goals in life is to always have good credit. So here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in business for myself, and a lot of times you have to use credit. I'm a developer. Sometimes I don't have an income for a while I'm working on a project, and I use credit. Well, I have one credit card, a Chase Visa card, and my credit was so good, and I use it for my business as well as personal, and I have a $34,000 limit on that credit card. Well, over the last couple years, I ended up having to use that credit card in order to survive because my income, because of my medical circumstances, was below what I needed each month. Credit needs to be there in order to help you buy time until you can get on your feet sometimes. That's one of the purposes of credit. There's other reasons you need credit too. If you want to buy a house, which would be one of the best investments of your life, where you're building equity in a house, if you can buy a house at a good value and then live in it and watch the equity grow, you're not going to be able to buy a house without credit. And if you have good credit, your interest rate's going to be lower than if you don't have good credit. Sometimes if you have to have a car, you can buy a car. The very best thing to do is establish your credit, be on a cash basis, never use your credit cards, save them for emergencies. So the pecking order is you should have savings, but you need credit behind that. On my business class where I teach people how to succeed in business, one of my comments is there are 2 things that if you do not have, you're almost guaranteed to fail in business. One is working capital. That means cash reserves to carry you until your sales get to the level that you need them to be and you start being profitable. And the other is credit, because there's 2 things in business, and it's true in life. Almost always, when you're projecting when your money's going to come in the future, it almost never comes in as fast and as much as you want it to, especially in business. And the other thing is, when you're projecting your expenses into the future, there's generally going to be things that you didn't think about, overruns, things like that. So you put those 2 things together, that the sales don't come in as fast as you need them, and the expenses go over budget, and that means that you have less money to pay yourself, and then you end up having less money to pay all of your bills, and you're going to fall into where if you don't have savings or other assets to talk about, we're going to talk about assets at length in a future show, you start relying on credit, and if your income doesn't come up, your personal situation goes down. On page 22 of the Personal Finance Small Business Ownership Seminar, that's the key to the whole program. It shows how when your income's lower than you need, your personal resources start to get diminished, your budget gets harder and harder to meet, your credit card debt goes up, and your credit worthiness, your ability to have more credit, gets harder to get. So let me get into a couple basic ideas here. Credit is this thing that you don't want to have to use it, but you need to have it in case you do need it for emergencies. The very best thing for credit is to use for emergencies. Okay, so let me just talk to you about